Hey everyone, anyone going through a fun React Native upgrade? Yes? Woo! Okay. Well, I'm sure you have been in one of these situations before. Working on a long and complicated React Native upgrade, such as the one on the screen. This was the Coinbase app upgrade to React Native .73. You can see there were 55 files affected, more than 5,000 lines of code changed, and 90 commits were made to finally merge this. Well, the good news is that the PR review process went pretty fast. I wonder why. So React Native upgrades start as a simple task, and all of a sudden, it gets very complicated once you add native customizations to your code. At that point, you're going to need someone from, Evan Bacon in order to understand what you're doing. How about this other situation, editing multiple native files when setting up a dependency, like in the case of React Native Firebase, where you need to modify many files like the info list on iOS and Gradle files on the Android app. Well, great news. Expo has developed a system called Expo Prebuild that improves the developer experience in these situations. My name is Alfonso, and I was a release crew member for React Native 74, and I'm part of the DevX team at Coinbase. And today, I'll be talking about how we at Coinbase adopted Expo Prebuild. So, what is it? It is a system that takes a set of inputs and outputs a native project that, along with the JS bundle, can be compiled into a React Native app. This system is an implementation of an abstract process that Expo calls continuous native generation. For those of you who are beginning Expo projects from scratch, today, use this system by default. But for those of us working on older projects, Expo Prebuild is something that you need to adopt if you want to take advantage of the benefits. Expo has great documentation, and for the sake of time, I won't be discussing the steps in detail, but you can go to the website. OK, so now we know what it is, but why is it useful? Expo Prebuild can help you simplify React Native upgrades, minimize cross-platform configurations, and take advantage of dependency side effects. This last point is very interesting because it allows library authors to automate their library setup in your app by including all the necessary code as part of their package in the form of an Expo plugin. This reduces the complexity of including the library into your app. Remember that previous Firebase getting started setup? It can be simplified to just adding the plugin to the app config file. OK, so Expo Prebuild sounds great so far, but you know what's more complicated than maintaining a React Native app? Maintaining multiple React Native apps. This is why Expo Prebuild was very attractive to us at Coinbase to scale the maintainability of our apps, which have a similar code base and dependencies, plenty of native customizations, and expensive React Native upgrades. Adopting the system meant we could minimize duplicated work, reduce the maintenance and upgrade costs of our apps, and standardize the native projects and common dependencies. And another key feature was strengthening the debugging resources, since a bug on a shared dependency will most likely affect all apps. So even though we had confidence in the system, there were plenty of unknowns that could force us to stop using Expo Prebuild. One of the key selling points that we read in the Expo documentation was optionality. It is the idea that we can stop using the system at any time and the project would still work. So in order to achieve this, Expo Prebuild would need to produce a native project that is as similar as possible to the one that we already have. Unfortunately, we knew that Expo Prebuild's default behaviors would not be compatible with this goal. For example, generating a native project using Expo Prebuild would build for a specific variant, while our apps had many variants, and we wanted to keep it that way. This incompatibility, the amount of engineers touching the code, and the complexity of our app presented important challenges. After some thought, we were able to identify the main ones and create a plan to de-risk them all. Let's go through the challenges one by one. So we had many customizations, and we wanted to keep them, so we needed a way to migrate them out of the app. As explained before, generating equivalent projects was the main requirement to be able to pull the plug if needed. And third, the idea was to make engineers' lives easy. we didn't want to add something that would complicate their experience. So we needed a seamless transition with a shallow learning curve. Let's go through the first one. Migrating customizations. We split our code into 30 atomic pieces. These had to be moved out of the project in the form of plugins and React Native modules. Anything that would be triggered by a lifecycle event will live in an Expo module. And we would use plugins as our last resource since they're a bit more complicated to implement and maintain. So we compared the original native projects to the ones generated by Expo Prebuild using our new plugins to verify that the content was not significantly modified. All of this while keeping Expo Prebuild off until the migration was complete. We would turn it on once we could produce an equivalent project, confirming we didn't lose any of our customizations. Let's go through the second point. So, multivariant projects. So, our current native structure is similar to a native app with multiple variants. We had like debug, beta, alpha, production. An important decision we did to de-risk the project was to maintain our current structure. And again, optionality was key for us to be able to execute the project. So Expo Prebuild has opinionated config properties to change the native project. Some of the examples are like the splash screen, icons, and the app name. The properties can be specified by platform, like iOS and Android, but not by variant. The way Expo Prebuild solves this issue of having multiple variants is to set configuration properties in the app config specific for that variant you would like to build for. That will generate a native project specifically for that variant. We didn't want to change the whole structure of our project to what Expo recommends. It wouldn't have been possible to turn off Prebuild in that case, since we wouldn't be able to produce projects for all the variants. Well, the good news is that Expo Prebuild is very powerful and extensible. We can create plugins that can leverage the mods that Expo already offers to create or modify pretty much anything within the native projects. That means we can create a new plugin that would support config properties for different variants in a single native project. Let's take a look at this plugin called with multiple variants that accepts an array of variants which contain similar properties already offered by Expo's app config. Inside, this plugin would iterate over every variant and do something very similar to what Expo plugins are already doing. This way, we can achieve equivalent projects to the ones we had, keeping the optionality feature throughout the entire project and beyond. Let's go through the third point, seamless transition. To avoid adding steps or commands to our engineers' workflow, we had to implement a tool that would run Expo Prebuild when changes were detected to specific files that would modify native projects. This way, we automated the regeneration of the native projects without engineers having to think about it. Even though native projects became ephemeral, we still wanted to commit the native changes on GitHub to maintain traceability and to simplify debugging when needed. After all, this was a new process, and we wanted engineers to be aware of any changes the system would make to catch any unforeseen behaviors. Whew, I know, that was a lot. But this is how 2 engineers were able to adopt Expo Prebuild in the Coinbase wallet app and set the base for the upcoming adoptions. I cannot wait to do our next React Native upgrade. Thank you.